The Edmonton Oilers got absolutely thumped Saturday night against the Avalanche, and it has to be the start of a turnaround, right? Oh yeah, and Chris Pronger stops by the show.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. Welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your team covered every single day. And today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win up to $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, a whole lot to get to. We are going to unpack every aspect of that absolute stinker Saturday night against the Avalanche. So, we are going to start out today's show by talking about why that game has to be an inflection point, a turning point in the direction this season is going. Our second segment, we will talk about the mechanics of why they fell apart so badly on Saturday night. And then, special treat, final segment, ahead of tonight's game against the Blue Jackets, Chris Pronger of Prime Hockey Canada was more than happy to give us a little bit of time to talk about his perspective in broadcasting versus as a player, and some stuff about the Oilers, Evan Bouchard, the vibe around the team, and a whole lot more. So, with all that said, let's get to work. The painful part of an NHL season is there are 82 games, and within that 82 game framework, where we have 10-ish months of hockey activities from the middle of September all the way through the end of June, if you're a team that is pushing to win a Stanley Cup, there are moments that ultimately come to define who you are as individuals, as coaches, as teams. And the thing that's a little bit different about hockey, and I forget who said this, I think it was Bob Stauffer said this on the post game after the game on Saturday. This is not baseball. In professional baseball, even the best teams are going to lose 60 to 70 games in a regular season. And everybody's going to have a game they lose, 14-3, 14-5. Everybody is going to have one or two of those games over the course of 162. In an 82 game season, the good teams, the great teams, they're going to lose something in the ballpark of 20 to 30 games. Somewhere in there is where most teams who are going to have a serious chance at winning the Stanley Cup are going to end up. And in the distribution of those 20 to 30 losses, you'll have some close ones. You'll have some not so close ones. You'll have ones where you melt down early. You'll have ones where you melt down late. And as of right now, the Edmonton Oilers, who have 6 wins through 16 games, have yet to really establish anything beyond potential. Their one good win, truly good win this year, came against the Utah Mammoth in a game where they came out of the gate slow, were trailing 3-1, stormed all the way back to ultimately win that game. But right now, this is about as dire as it's going to get. And the results on Saturday are about as grim as it's going to be. And the scoreline, of course, disgusting. That for the people who paid all the money to be in there, Saturday night, hockey night in Canada, primetime start local, full building, measuring stick game against another Stanley Cup contender, and got absolutely ran off the ice. And that wasn't a case of the Avalanche are so much better. It is a case of the Oilers came out rattled, and the Avalanche noticed that, got those first 2 on the board, game over. And a lot of it falls on the goaltending. A lot of it falls on the continued loud, noisy mistakes that continue to define this defensive group, that continue to define this forward group. But if everybody collectively throws in the towel at 2-1, at 2-0 for a game that still has 50 plus minutes to go, there can't be any ambiguity about what we saw on Saturday night, and that was flat out unacceptable. And it is easy for me, as someone who is sitting here doing a podcast, to critique how guys play. I am not in the locker room. I do not understand what these guys may or may not be going through. But understanding the anatomy of losses like this, it almost always comes down to guys checking out. And the funny and the ironic part of this, and we'll talk about this more in our second segment, so I won't go too in depth now, but there is a real understanding in hockey that the harder you're fighting it, the harder you're pushing, the more prone you are going to be to making mistakes. And I think you see this a lot from the way Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard approach playing goalie. I think you see this a lot when Oiler forwards start to make mistakes, when Oiler defenders start to make mistakes. It is guys taking on too much responsibility, trying to make things happen by themselves because they both are frustrated with the game state and worried about the game state. And it creates this trickle-down cascading effect where you have no chance of getting your feet under you. And Saturday night was as rattled as I have ever seen a team at the NHL level. Now, every year, there are a couple games like this. And not every team has them, but there are a couple. You know, there was one a couple years ago where the Penguins lost 10-1. I think it was at San Jose, something along those lines. That happens from time to time. But those are more a product of the mental aspect of the game than the score itself. And I think that's what really jumped out to me. And we know Colorado's good. We know Colorado is arguably the best team in the entire NHL. You know how good McKinnon and Makar are. You watched Gabe Landeskog pick up his first goal in almost 2 years. You understand that this is a team that has lofty aspirations. And that's why Saturday night was a measuring stick game. The Oilers have not played great hockey through the middle of November where we are now. And you look at games against the Colorados, the Vegases, the real contenders of the world as a benchmark, as a measuring stick to get a handle and an understanding of where you are as a team. Because even if the results aren't great around it, if you can rise to the occasion, if you can elevate your results against the Colorados of the world in the regular season, okay, that shows proof of concept. That shows that even though we still have work to do, we can play with anyone. And I have said it more than once now over the course of the first month and a half of the season. The everydayers at this point know this is drummed into the back of their heads. Good teams find ways to win games even when they're not playing well. Bad teams find ways to lose games no matter how well they're playing. And the Oilers didn't even I can't say they didn't try. Obviously, they're professional athletes. They were competing, trying to win that game. But they did not have the requisite effort level, attention to detail, all of the little things that go into playing well as a team, as a unit on Saturday night were not present. There was such a chicken with your head cut off type feel to that game on Saturday night where, yeah, I know Colorado is good. I know Makar is great. I know McKinnon's great. I know Makar is capable of scoring a hat trick as a defenseman. But to allow him to score 2 goals in the exact same way from the exact same spot goes to show you just how disorganized the Oilers were. And it's going to cue up what we're going to talk about in a minute. But that mentality, that sulking, the slouch shoulders, the despondent facial expressions, there was no effort to get that game on the tracks. There was no effort to slow the game down. That was a full-on old-school boat race. The Oilers did not have a chance on Saturday night. They did not look competitive, and that is easily the worst game I have seen the Oilers play in the 2-ish seasons I've been the host of Locked On Oilers. And frankly, that's one of the worst games I've ever seen any team at the NHL level play, because I know the Oilers are better than this. If the Sharks, if the Blackhawks, if the Kraken, if one of those middling or bad teams, you know, the Nashville Predators of the world, if one of those teams goes out there and gets thumped 9-2 by Colorado, you say, well, those young guys are learning. They're going to have to figure it out someday. The Oilers are better than they're playing right now. And that is what is so frustrating. And I think ultimately why we're going to have an honest conversation about the makeup of this group. And speaking of, coming up next on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, I'm going to tell you why it was the mental aspect of the game, not the on-ice aspect that let Saturday night get so out of hand. Did you just realize your business needed to hire someone like yesterday? How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed, sponsored jobs, put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidate faster. We have all been in that spot where our team needs the right hire like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly where Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored jobs credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports network. And before we get to our second segment, as promised, we are going to continue doing our one thing I was happy for from each game, because in an 82-game season, over the course of 7 to 8 months, you got to find something in every game. And the only positive thing I can say about Saturday night's game is that it ended eventually. And I sit here after games like that, and I was laying in bed. The game was over. I was staring up at the ceiling. I was listening to the post game, and it is as deflating a feeling you can have as a sports fan, as a content creator, as a media person, because I can't help you. And that's a bit arrogant. That's a little suppositional that I have something to offer. But you think about everybody who paid to be in the building on Saturday night, everybody who took time out of their Saturday night. They could have went out. They could have did something fun. They could have done something productive. They could have watched a movie. They could have read a book. And instead, they chose to spend 3 hours with the Oilers getting their doors blown off. I feel bad for the fans. I don't feel bad for the guys on the team to the same degree. Do I understand that these are arduous circumstances, that the team is clearly going through some growing pains, that they are trying to figure out their identity? They are on a journey of self-discovery, the way so many of us are in our day-to-day lives. And when you need things to line up, and that's really how games like Saturday night fall apart. I made the comparison more than once this season, and for my everydayers, you know what I'm talking about. A hockey team is like a watch. You have all of those gears and components turning simultaneously. And if one part of that clock stops working properly, the whole thing falls apart and it stops keeping time. There is a real rhythmic flow to what good hockey looks like. It starts with a recovery. It leads to a breakout. It leads to a carry-in. It leads to offense. It leads to scoring chances, and eventually it leads to goals. Right now, the Oilers are wholly and fundamentally out of rhythm. And some of that is mentality. It is forwards flying the zone too early. It is defenders desperately flinging pucks up the wall and through the middle of the ice, trying to get up ice, because they understand the struggle it's been to score at 5-on-5, and frankly, the struggle it's been to score at all. And you get into that sense of desperation. You get into that sense of this isn't going well, this isn't going well, and you're swimming against the current at that point. And I have made that comparison a lot over the years of doing hockey content. When it is going bad, it is comparable to swimming against a riptide, where you are trying as hard as you possibly can to get back to the shore, but the tide is always going to be stronger than you. It is always going to overpower you eventually. And the signs are at the beach for a reason. You got to swim perpendicular to the riptide, parallel to the shore, so you can get out of it and you can find an egress in there and get back to shore. Because the way the Oilers played on Saturday night was as discombobulated. And I have been hammering the Oilers for their transition play for a good 2 weeks now, because offense, defense, some of that's fluky. Some of that is just the flow of the game. The other team has more of an output. Transition play is entirely about effort. If I am a defender going back to get a loose puck, am I skating as hard as I can to get there? Am I giving the person who's about to receive this pass from me a good pass? Am I catching them in stride? Am I putting this pass in a position where they can receive it and continue the sequence? Or are they going to need to stop? Are they going to need to turn around? Are they going to need to adjust to receive the pass? And that's step one. If I'm a forward, am I flying the zone early? Am I at the half wall to give a short, crisp breakout option for my defender, because if I'm flying the zone early, and that was what was happening a lot on Saturday, the other team's just going to jump in front of those long stretch passes. And you take away those long stretch passes, you get suffocated. The Avalanche put on a 4-checking clinic Saturday night. And the only way to withstand an aggressive forecheck to that degree is short, crisp breakout passes. You want organized regroups. You want outlets. You want multiple guys who can receive that puck on their way to the neutral zone. And instead, the Oilers kept flinging pucks to no one in particular, the good old hope pass. And the Oilers could not get anything resembling hockey going. And the Oilers are now at a point where the basics have escaped them. They are at a point where you cannot depend on any of their goalies to make a save. You cannot depend on their defensemen to execute a breakout pass. You really can't depend on the Oilers to score in any situations other than the power play. And I understand the Oilers are trying to integrate a lot of new pieces. They are missing Zach Hyman. And as you're going to hear in the conversation with Chris Pronger in our final segment, when you're trying to turn over that much of a roster in one offseason, you're giving younger players like Savoy or Howard the opportunity to figure it out at the NHL level as opposed to the AHL level. There are going to be bumps and bruises. The problem, of course, for the Oilers is this is not a case of Savoy and Howard being overmatched and the Oilers don't have the depth. This is a case of the team's veterans, the perceived strength of this team on paper, McDavid, Draisaitl, and the defense. On paper, coming into the season, the Athletic had the Oilers top 4 as one of the best units in the entire league. Between Bouchard and Ekholm and Nurse and Wallman, this was supposed to be a group capable of tilting the ice in the offense's favor, making up for some of the shortcomings, especially in terms of finishing talent, giving the forwards more opportunities to play offense and to play less defense. And instead, the Oilers' defense over the last week or two has been awful. And yes, Evan Bouchard needs to be better. Ekholm, everybody cannot escape this conversation. You don't have the type of game you do on Saturday night and start giving guys passes. You don't make excuses. And Connor and Leon, as great as they are, they understand that Saturday night's unacceptable. They understand that right now, the way the team is playing, they need more. Not only from themselves, but everybody. And as guys who maybe aren't the most fiery, impassioned, rile up the guy type leaders, there's an implied understanding that because they're not the traditional leader, they're not the traditional yelling, rah, rah, fire up the guys types, you need to lead by example with your play. And there is only so much two guys can do when the mechanics of the rest of the team are falling apart. And when your mechanics fall apart, you have nothing to fall back on. You have no foundation. You have no base. And that's what you saw on Saturday night. A hockey team a month into the season, 6 weeks into the season, that still doesn't know what it wants to be, how it can play an effective style game to game that is going to yield victories. Now, I am not ready to write the Oilers off, but we are going to reach a critical mass in really short order. There is enough talent here that the Oilers should be playing better than they are. And when talent consistently underperforms its talent, that's a reflection on process. That is a reflection on coaching. And that leaves a lot to be desired right now. We're going to take our second and final break on this edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, Hockey Hall of Famer, one-time Edmonton Oiler, Chris Pronger joins the show to talk about the Oilers and transitioning from player to broadcaster. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, or if you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. If you were curious, we aren't making much progress so far in the NBA season. We're relatively early on. The Thunder still 2-1 to win the whole thing. The Nuggets 6.5 to 1, same thing as the Cavs 6.5 to 1. My Knicks 12 to 1. The LeBron-less Lakers 14 to 1. The Rockets with Kevin Durant checking in at 17-1. FanDuel keeps every game exciting, especially when the team you're with is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much to everybody who is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day and who helped make Locked On the #1 podcast network. So I'm going to transition to our conversation with Chris Hockey Hall of Famer Chris Pronger. Hope you guys enjoy. I will see you guys tonight after the game against the Blue Jackets. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Oilers, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you guys then. Enjoy the talk with Chris. And we are very grateful on today's edition of Locked On Oilers to welcome prime Monday Night Hockey analyst, Hockey Hall of Famer, one-time Edmonton Oiler, and most importantly, one of my favorite players growing up, Chris Pronger. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. My pleasure, and thanks for being a fan.
Always. You were the most overpowered player in the video games as a kid because you were so tall, you couldn't get knocked off the puck, and you had the wicked slap shot. And when you're 8 years old, that's the most important thing in the video game. So
absolutely.
Let's jump on into it. What have you learned the most about hockey after leaving the game and pivoting towards an analyst perspective?
You look at the game in a different light. Obviously, when you're playing, there's a lot of X's and O's. There's a lot of nuance as a player in honing your craft and then learning tendencies and things of that nature. As an analyst, it's more about how do you explain your knowledge and explain what you know about the game in a manner in which the fan and the person on the other end of it can understand. Sometimes the technical side of things, it's like being at a tech conference and listening to somebody talk, and it's going to go over your head. It's trying to boil it down into its simplest form and why it's important. Why what you're seeing is important to the fan watching on TV or listening to a broadcast or what have you. How can you describe it in a manner in which they can understand and then realize, oh wow, okay, when this happens, this is why this happens, and on, and why that's significant to maybe the outcome of a play, a period, a game, a season, things of that nature. So it's fun to be a part of that.
And going off of that, you had mentioned what fans think of. What would you say is a misconception fans have about hockey from a player's perspective? The one I always go to whenever I talk to players is fans don't realize how hard it is to actually get a shot on goal. The people who are yelling shoot constantly don't seem to realize that the players have a better angle of the net.
Yeah. And there's, now, especially nowadays, there's probably anywhere between 6 to 10 pairs of legs in the way, bodies, plus the goaltender. There's a lot of moving parts involved in that. But, I think taking that part aside, I think just what we want to present to the fan is what the people in the building feel, is the energy, the excitement, the noises on the ice and things of that nature. And that's what I think as a player who was always interested in that side of it, and now being on this side, how do we present that part of it in a way that really brings the fan experience closer to the action? And, whether it's, the banter between players or the sounds on the ice and big hits and all the things that happen. The excitement as fans in the building see a play evolving, and as the camera is picking it all up, it can be very enticing. So, that's the exciting part about it, is how do you describe that and kind of bring the fan experience to the TV from the building and all the energy and things that come along with that. So it's that to me is the biggest challenge and opportunity to really kind of engage the fan watching at home.
So pivoting specifically to the Oilers, who are taking on the Blue Jackets tonight on Prime Monday Night Hockey, I wanted to ask you, when a team that has really high expectations, you've been on some great teams, those Ducks teams, the Oilers team that went really far that one year, what would you say is the key to getting out of this early season malaise, where obviously everybody expects this team to be a good one? but it's not getting going. What would you say is the key to finding that first step to getting to making progress?
I think people don't want to hear this. I think patience needs to be involved first and foremost. There's been a little rollover in the roster. They've gotten a lot younger. I think maybe the expectations on those younger players may have been a little high. They need to learn the league. They need to gain a little experience, learn tendencies of players around the league. Players on the other teams are learning about them. They've lost a vocal leader in Corey Perry. They've lost Evander Kane. They've lost some players that, Zach Hyman's not there. They've lost a lot of energy guys. And so as you roll these younger guys who are, eyes wide open coming into the league, getting their first kick at the NHL and opportunity, it can be a little daunting. So, giving a little space for them to kind of feel their way out, and allow maybe the superstars to lug a little bit more than maybe they want to, while they're figuring out what type of role they're playing on the team and how they can best help this team win. It takes a little bit of time, and it takes a little bit of time to find the right chemistry, the right units. And once they get healthy, knock on wood, we'll see what the real Edmonton Oilers look like. But I think people need to understand from year to year, that always changes. There's always players coming in, coming out. Albeit last year they were pretty similar, outside of maybe a couple small pieces. This year they rolled over a little bit more of the roster and gotten younger on purpose, if you will, and trying to bring in some youth into the mix. And that takes a little bit of time. Younger players take time to evolve and grow into their roles and understand what's expected of them and how to play consistent hockey. And that's the hallmark of a true pro.
Speaking of playing consistent hockey from one elite defenseman to another, if you were to pull Evan Bouchard aside, who is quite the lightning rod amongst the discourse for people online, what would you tell him?
I haven't heard anything about that.
What would you tell Evan Bouchard about his game? Because what makes him great is his ability to be so calm and make the game kind of happen around him. And it's just the big mistakes. Other than the big mistakes, it's incredible. What would you tell him about his game the way you've seen it go so far this year?
Yeah, I think it's that high risk nature that fans have loved, because when it pays off, they typically score goals. But it's also, I think it's more, for me, it's the attention to detail on defense. It's being committed defensively and understanding that side of the game is just as important as the offensive side. And while, their expectation is for him to get points and run the power play and facilitate on the back end over to McDavid and Draisaitl, et cetera, you also need to really compete and be committed defensively. And I think the lapses defensively this year have maybe been a little bit more egregious than in years past. He's been prone to serving up the odd pizza and making, trying to hold the blue line and cheat offensively. And, that's fine. That's how he plays. But I think it's the more egregious things that have happened this year that maybe have fans on edge a little bit more. And, oh, by the way, he's now making $10.5 million. So their expectations of what he's committed to doing and how he goes about his business on a day-to-day basis on the ice, I think those expectations may have changed because of the number associated with his name.
And then last question for you, Chris, before I get you out of here. What do you make of the fact the Oilers have gotten off to funky starts several years in a row now? Do you think that's just who these guys are, or do you think there's something circumstantial or environmental that's kind of making this happen repeatedly?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the $1 million question. I'm not in the locker room. I don't really know kind of what's going on in the first quarter of the season. But it does seem like the last 3 or 4 years they've gotten off to slow starts. I think expectations maybe that they're going to be at Stanley Cup level out of the gate. And, I think because they have had a little bit of turnover and are trying to find the right line combinations and find combinations that take a little bit of the offensive responsibility off of McDavid and Draisaitl and try to find some secondary and tertiary scoring, that can be an issue too, because the best time to do that is early in the season to try to figure out what you're working with. So you're not, playing around is maybe the wrong terminology, but working with the roster to try to figure out what could work down the line. So when you do put everybody in a blender and try to find the right line combinations, you've seen them maybe before and You have a better understanding of who might fit and work with who on the team. Outside of that, I don't really have an answer other than, you know what, it's just a slow building up process of, we're kind of working our way into the season. We're getting into the dog days, the grind of January, February, and then, they've got it in overdrive and they're cranking on, March, April, and kind of really trying to peak at the right time. I think the worst thing that we've seen over the years is teams have peaked in October and November. And maybe in years past, they've done that. And I think maybe that's just their way of like, all right, let's not empty the tank, if you will, in October and November. And let's make sure, we're in the conversation. And as we're getting closer and deeper into the season, we're going to start ramping up and really being more committed to doing all the little things and sacrificing our bodies. And, it's a long grind of a season, and it takes a lot to win in this league because it is the parity is so great that you need everybody going on every night to be successful.
Greatly appreciate your time, Chris, and thank you for reinforcing what I say on the show all the time, that 82 games is an extremely long time. We are a 10-month sport now. We're middle of September to the end of June, so it's patience is key. Patience is the key.
And on that, they've also gone to the Stanley Cup Finals back-to-back seasons. That takes a toll on the players. Typically they're nursing injuries on into the early part of the season, whether it be they've had surgery or rehabbing injuries throughout the course of the summer, a much shortened summer, back-to-back years now. So just that lingering effect. I wouldn't look too much into this outside of, bringing in the younger guys and slowly trying to work injured players and guys that have had shortened seasons back into the mix and trying to take minutes away from guys to see what you're working with. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out through the course of the first half of the season.
Chris, thank you so much for your time. You can catch Chris and the rest of the Prime Hockey broadcast on Prime Video tonight for Oilers Blue Jackets. See you guys later.